Morning, Bill.
Good morning, Mark. Well, here we are in another location. In fact, we've been here before, and you'll talk about that in a minute. But it's been a good week, hasn't it? And a lot of activity, and more particular, I went to see the Cats win on Saturday.
Yes, it was a very hot day, wasn't it?
In fact, we had to leave at half-time because Liz was sweating so much that she thought she'd boil.
It was a very, very hot day. I felt for the players out there running around. They were drinking lots of water, though.
And last night you and I went out with the judges from the Geelong Business Awards because they're about to start.
They're about to start.
So
entries are
we're looking
being
for
asked
entries.
for. Yep.
Yes. So I'm looking forward to judging the awards this year because we always meet some really interesting people.
We do.
All right, so Mark, let's start. Where are we today and who are we interviewing?
Well, we're sitting in Federal Mills, which is an area that keeps, every time I come here, it's got something else added to it. And of course, last night dinner we held down at the end of Packington Street in the Wool store, which is also part of the Hamilton Brothers development. And that was very good. Food was fantastic there, so very interesting. And we're going to interview Tony Costa. Hello, Tony.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Tony.
And I should declare, Tony, I've known Tony for probably a long time, indirectly from his past life at Christian College, but we'll talk about that later. So, Tony, question one. Where did you go to primary school?
Yeah, so I'm Geelong through and through. I grew up and went to Our Ladies Primary School over there in Herne Hill from prep through to year 4. And then the family moved over to Highton and I moved to Montpellier Primary School. My mum and dad still live literally next door. We moved, and for a term I stayed over at Our Ladies, but Montpellier Primary School in Highton there for years 5 and 6.
So it was easy to jump over the fence to get to school, is that right?
Very easy. Yeah, you sleep in till 5 minutes before the bell, and then you go.
Or you run in as the bells go.
Yeah.
That's cool. And then from there?
So then from there, St Joey's, 7 through to 12, up on the hill there in Newtown.
Oh, that's good, and just St Joey's is just one of the many good secondary colleges we have in this area, and we're blessed, I think. Yeah.
We are. We're very, very fortunate, and we might get into this, but I did spend a fair bit of time in education, and one of the things we spoke about a lot in Geelong was the per capita, independent schools is densely populated. We've got a lot of independent schools, a lot of Catholic schools, and a lot of great state schools. So, yeah, it's a perfect place to raise your family. Yeah,
well, you are. And so, what were you good at school?
I was good at being cheeky and getting into trouble mostly.
Did they have the strap in those days?
No, I just...
you missed that era.
I just missed the strap.
Would you like to see my scarf?
Well, you would have gone through it that time.
Yeah.
Still, yeah. No, look, probably for me it was sport. It was always sport and fun and, sort of running, athletic, but mostly, cricket and footy, but sort of followed the football path mostly through the secondary years. Yeah.
And in the secondary years, did you have any idea what you wanted to do in the future?
Look, I was young. I was 16, turning 17 in year 12, and so I just wanted to play footy. Even in year 12, I still thought I had the dream of getting drafted to the Cats, and so I really didn't know. And I had a phys ed teacher that was quite influential with me. Pulled me aside, pulled me out of a class one day. I still distinctively remember it in year 12. I was mucking around. Pulled me out, took me for a walk, thought I was going to be told off and a little bit of trouble, but it was a partnering conversation around, hey, where are you going? What are you going to do if footy doesn't work out? Have you thought about? And he actually suggested that I look at teaching. He said, you'd be a fantastic teacher. Why don't you look at phys ed teaching? Which is ultimately what I did.
I noticed on your profile that's where you started in education.
I did, yeah. So it was the phys ed part of the teaching that drew me in. When I turned up to O Week, you had to choose a second stream with that course. It'd have 2 methods, and I chose mathematics, not because I was overly enthusiastic about it, but it was more around the job opportunity for having a phys ed mathematics. And interestingly, I fell more in love with mathematics and phys ed and taught more maths in the first few years anyway.
So it was, when you look back then, that teacher did you a big favour.
He did, yeah, completely. It was really an influence. I didn't know it at the time, but often in retrospect, when you reflect back, it was a very deep and influential conversation that just guided me, that actually opened up a pathway for a career for 20 years. Saw something in me that probably from a disposition or connect with people that he thought that I would be a good fit. I've bumped into him a number of times, and I've told him that story, and he just smiles. He was a football guy as well. He actually coached me down at Falcons and under 16s actually. So it was a pivotal sliding door sort of moment there that opened up.
That's very good.
Yeah. Well, that was
That's very
pivotal
good.
moment, because to have a teacher that can recognise something in a student and then be able to talk to them properly about it and maybe direct them in the right path. I think that's fantastic.
That's fantastic.
Now,
that's good.
Did you have any jobs when you were at school?
Yeah, I had a few jobs. Had a paper run through Highton for
There
a
we
number
go.
of years.
There's the paper run. They don't exist anymore.
We can tell her how old our interviewees are because we know the ones that have had paper rounds.
Yep. Right. So I had it was actually a pamphlet round, which wasn't probably quite as sexy as a paper round, but I had the pamphlet round. But I worked in retail at Target actually.
There you go.
Which was a great little part-time job.
And it's interesting, those big groups, Woolies, Target, Coles, so many people get their kick-off in life through there. It's fantastic.
That's right.
So where do you go to from high school then?
So from high school, I actually had two options. So I did get into teaching at Ballarat University, and my plan was to defer because I'd been accepted into an AFL traineeship in sort of sports admin, which is another interest area. Yep. One of my good mates from high school, he and I both got in. Another good St Joey's boy, Cameron Ling, actually. Okay. And so we sort of, that was a bit of a dividing path. He continued that. He was obviously down at Geelong, and one thing led to another for him down there. I had the option of either I wasn't allowed to defer university. I either had to do a semester or, forego my place. So I said, no, I'll forgo the traineeship and I'll go to uni. And so, Ballarat University for 4 years. I was doing the Bermuda Triangle. I was living in Geelong. I moved out of home, but I was living in Geelong, going to university in Ballarat, and I was playing footy in Werribee Tigers, VFL. So I had this big Bermuda Triangle. The drawback to Geelong was part-time work, family, girlfriend. Obviously, university, you stay up there a couple of nights a week because that's what you do. Uni life was good. It was good. And then, so that time went, when you're in it, it feels like forever, but retrospect, it was a blink of an eye, really.
And were you working at all? Any jobs while you were doing that?
Yeah, so I was working, worked at a local nightclub, pulling beers. I worked at a local restaurant down in Little Mallup Street that's no longer there. Beautiful little place, little Spanish place. You probably might remember it. Bombolino's?
Oh, yep.
Worked there. So worked nights, worked days. Still worked at Target. Played footy. Played senior, football, and you little pocket money for that. And went through uni. And sort of towards the end of sort of third year, I picked up some other teaching. So it was actually a real privilege that one of my best mates and I, who was also at university, started working for a company called Geelong Adult Training Education. GATE was the acronym. They had a youth services. So for children that have been outside of mainstream school, issues drug, alcohol dependency, but it was an alternate program, and I was fortunate enough to do that alongside university, and that was the first
That's good.
Yeah.
So what was your first sort of permanent teaching role?
So my first permanent teaching role, actually, first year out of university, I worked there full-time. Yeah. I ran that program, ran the Out to Red Numeracy, Literacy and Health program, and then I transitioned over to Christian College. Yeah. So I was there, and again, because I was young in my year level, I was 21 when I started teaching full-time, which is crazy.
What was your first teaching?
Christian College was Phys Ed Mathematics.
Phys Ed Mathematics.
Yeah.
It's an interesting combination.
Yeah. Look, it is. It was a perfect combination for me because I think the nature of the classroom is very different teaching to outside, and again, it was less probably for me. It was less about the mathematics and more about that's the connect to the kids. Inherently, that was a subject that most students didn't like. So able to probably connect in a different way, and I always found maths enjoyable, easy enough.
So you went from outdoor going to school every day in shorts and a t-shirt to having to put some real clothes on. Is that right?
100%. And math teachers were hard to find in that era. So I actually very quickly found myself majority teaching maths and not much phys ed. But that was a really great opportunity moving into a big school. So I was fortunate enough that there was leadership opportunities that came up really quickly. So I taught for 3 years in the classroom and then had an opportunity to move campuses and take on a coordinating role across 789, which is actually down at...
That's where we met.
Where we met, Mark.
Where's that camp? Which campus is that?
It's just the campus down in Drysdale.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And so that was... what was I, 24? That was young. And then, fortunate enough, again, opportunity arose to step into a vice principal position at 27. Still down at that campus, and had a lot to do with Mark's
kids.
His delinquent children?
Oh, look,
Huh?
there were some delinquents. His two weren't. No, they were fantastic kids. And then, was it 6 years later, so 33, had the opportunity to transition back to the main campus at Highton, the big old clock tower in Burdekin Road there.
Yes,
And,
old St Augustine's Orphanage.
that's the one. So I was campus principal there at 33 for 6.5 years.
Yes, well, I knew that place when it was an orphanage because we were boarders at St Joey's and they were rebuilding, and 6 of us had to go and live down there for a month. Yeah, they'd take us down at night time and come back in the morning, and I'll never forget the smell. Isn't it interesting what sticks with you? Anyway, that's just a little side comment.
Thankfully, the smell's probably gone. A lot of that, that heritage, a beautiful old building.
But you were there 19 years, I read. Is that right?
Yeah, 19 and a half years. So, it's that when you look back and you look at a period of your life, what I grew into a man. I was a kid really moving in. And so through those walls, I did mature into a man, a husband, a father, through that time. Obviously married, 4 kids. A lot happens there. And schools are really interesting places. And if you've got teachers in your family, people understand that, but they're beautiful places, but they're very intense places, and it's almost a bit of a vortex. The longer you're in there, the deeper you get, and it's in some ways they're quite insular. It's a little bit different what I found with business, a lot more outward facing. You don't have time to look out other than maybe some of your professional development, but you have this inward focus because so for me I had 650 adolescents, 1,000 parents, 90 staff. There's a lot that happens on a day today, but I guess if you feel, and I did, I felt that was sort of a calling for me as part of where my giftings were, and part of that sliding moment, even choosing teaching. But it was certainly it's something I look back on really fondly.
At the end of 19 years, something flashed
before we jump into the commercial. Were you still playing footy through all those years? Because I know you've got a passion for it.
Yeah, so I not all of those years. I didn't. No, I played. I played. Obviously, played a couple of years at Werribee, but I played sort of 200 odd senior games at Geelong West. I was senior captain out there in the GFL. My last 2 years when I was down at Drysdale, I finished off 2 years at Drysdale in the BFL. Yeah. We won a flag out there, and I retired on a flag. So I retired. I still probably had. I felt I had a lot of footy left, but I retired at 29. And
before you start really hurting yourself.
Well, Tony, we had young kids. So
Tony, the Masters have started training for this season.
I know,
so there's still hope for you.
I've had a few calls to go down to the Masters.
Well, I was talking to Gareth Kent the other day, and Gareth said, I've got to get fit. I've lost weight. Right.
So one of my boys has just come out of under-18. So my second child, eldest son, he's just come out of under-18s, and he's signed over at Geelong West. So he's talking, Dad, we're going to play a game together this year. So
the challenge is
I told him, well, we're playing at 2 o'clock, mate, not 12 o'clock.
That's right. Well, I guess, so quick, going back to where I was, right, so something has happened. You've had a tipping point or a sliding door moment, as Mark says. What was it that's I've finished that part of my career, I'm moving to something else?
So look, that's probably a whole conversation in itself. It was a lot of things. So probably if I step back a little bit, had always thought that felt that I could do something else. was a constant encouragement from my wife that I know you love what you do, you're great, it's, but you can, of course you can do other things. So it was always there. We took long service leave in 2021, and we spent best part of 4.5 months in the caravan. We missed about 6 lockdowns in Victoria.
Because you were elsewhere.
Careful who I say that to, but we had a remarkable time. So 3 of our 4 children, our 3 boys, and my wife and I, we spent that time completely out, and it was probably the first time in my working career that I'd completely switched off. There's the gag about teachers get a lot of holidays, but you don't really switch off. And so that was the first time, because you had to completely hand over that for that 4 months.
Yep.
Cognitively, I was present, I was there, and I probably found that being out gave me a better perspective looking back in. And it was, okay, actually I just turned 40, now's the time. If I'm going to go, I'm either going back in, and the next decade is senior leadership, either at that school or I'd looked at, other schools, Christian schools up on the sunny coast. We toyed with that, but it was probably that pivotal point. When we came back, it was a bit of a pressure cooker that time in schools, in the community. There was a lot going on. There was a whole part of that I didn't align well with, and it was really probably that was the tipping point to say, okay, this is the time. So I took 12 months leave without pay. At that time, and interestingly, as an aside, I had a really bad bike accident just when I took leave. So I was actually probably fairly lucky. Smashed 4 ribs and punctured a lung, and it was a good 3 to 4 month recovery whilst I was on leave. And I guess those things with what was happening in the world, the intensity in schools, having that time out, created an opportunity for me to look at other things. So I got a call out of the blue from Dale Smith, who's the original business owner here. Our current executive director, I didn't know Dale. He said, hey, look, I've got your number off another great friend of mine, childhood friend who works in industry out here. And he said, look, this is what Tony's done. He's stepped out. He's got time. You should give him a call. So I came in. We had a coffee. We had 2 coffees. We probably spoke for 3 hours and didn't even talk about work. And I left thinking, that was a great chat. 1 million crossovers in Geelong. He's got 4 kids. I've got 4 kids.
Yep.
He's sort of almost a decade older, 8 years older than me, but we had a lot of synergies. A couple of weeks later, he called again. He said, hey, look, what are you doing? By that stage, I was bored. He said, well, do you want to come in? I've got a project that's growing. So it was not even a sliding door moment. It was an opportunity, and I said, well, I'm going to have a look at it. It was a very open and honest chat between he and I. It was like, I don't know if I'm going to be any good or if you're going to like me. This is a handshake agreement. And he said, you stay for a little or as long as you like. We'll see how it goes. At that time, there was quite a big project that the business was working on up in northern New South Wales that I sort of took a handle of, and the project grew. Ended up turning into, over that next sort of 18 months, about a $16 million project. So it grew in complexity and people, so I had the ability to hire people, grow a team, and I guess through that I grew a bit of a love for doing something different, realised I could, and Dale felt, okay, Tony's maybe got something to offer to the business, so we came back to a conversation around, hey, what does this look like moving forward? So that was sort of the in.
Yeah.
What's kept me in, and this is me, and this is part of the reason why I was 20 years in education, is I'm drawn to people and the connect, and if we have a genuine, alignment in values. Dale, really early inspired me around what he was hoping and wanting to do with this business, and his, value to his family and his children. The way he viewed the staff was a really strong alignment to how I see life and work and business and sport and family. And so I guess that was the first alignment around, hey, I think we can partner, and his skill set and my skill set, very complementary, very different, but coming together, we felt that we could grow something which we've been able to do, so far in a short period of time. We think we've still got.
What do you think the biggest lesson you've learnt in leadership, having made that move, and now you're well and truly into your role?
Yeah.
What do you think the biggest lesson in leadership that you've sort of observed, or that you practice, or that you think is absolutely critical to get the job done?
One of the things I think we all do this, and as men we probably have this that question inwardly, like, are we good enough? What if we, can we do it? And I think for me, stepping across, in education, we'd always spoken to young people around dispositional skills. You can take these things, you learn them, and they can go across industries. Actually experiencing that for myself was critical. So what I found was similar in a school, in a football club, in a business was, which was my probably leaning is valuing people. So that leadership style for me is, at the heart of everything is your people. It's your customers, it's your staff, it's your family. And I think that bit around leadership, if you take that into any scenario, any business, and you're genuine and you're authentic, that creates culture. Culture creates an opportunity for businesses to grow. We say growing people grow businesses, growing people grow schools, growing people grow students. So that notion here of actually investing in our staff, wanting to grow our staff, caring about them is, I think for me, that's maybe it's a little bit cliche, but that leadership is people first.
It's real and it's the truth.
Yeah.
And you've learnt that through your lived experience. That's what's happened.
Have you had a steep learning curve?
Yeah, look, I have in a different way here. Schools they're intense, but they're gentle in a way. Your stakeholders are parents. Like you and I can connect on a point because we're talking about a little person who you care about. My first big learning curve here, stepping into some big boy shoes, was to go and sit in a boardroom on Collins Street with a big client who owed us a significant amount of money. And in what I thought was a fairly straightforward conversation, it wasn't. So there's a ruthlessness in business that did shake me, and so not that I've become hardened to that, but just being aware of it, being more strategic. So it has been a really steep learning curve, even in terms of what Scaada does as a business. There's a lot of we've got great staff here, a lot of intelligent people, but there's a deep science behind a lot of what we do. That's not my background. So learning and understanding that at a level without getting so deep into the technicality. I don't need to be the technical expert, but to really understand and appreciate what we do to help sort of drive the growth. But yeah, it has been a really big learning curve for sure.
Well, just on that point, Tony, people listening to this, what does Scaada do?
Yeah, well, it's
a good lead-in.
It's a good leading. So, at a really high level, so we're an environmental and sustainability consultancy, obviously based in Geelong, proudly Geelong. So we have a really broad offering of environmental services. So everything from environmental management plans to looking at contaminated soils. There's a lot of in the media at the moment around contaminated soil and PFAS. So supporting construction in those areas, water treatment, contaminated water, doing the regulatory, supporting big civil companies with their regulatory compliance, sitting between the EPA and the contractors, all the way over to occupational hygiene. So thinking everything: asbestos, mould, silica, dust, vibration, noise. We have a fully functional lab here in our head office, so it's a NADA accredited lab that is accredited for microbials and asbestos. So we would be, we support mums and dads in Highton with mould assessments, all the way through to big, remediation jobs with asbestos fines. And really, there's a lot. Well, there's a lot in between there. As we know, there's a big movement around some of the ESG markers. We talk internally here around things being sustainably sustainable, and so not just ticking a box for a sustainability.
So it's a bit like
credit.
Ticking the box for an ISO, isn't it?
Yeah.
Some people just go through the motions.
Go and tick it.
They want to put it here. Look what I've got.
Correct.
But they don't practice it.
No, and so it's embedding some of those other practices, which has been great for me. I mean, I always had a care for, the environment and people, and this is sort of an extension to that. Look, our staff are super passionate around the environment, around ways to improve it and preserve it. So that the business inherently stands for that. And so as the market moves, we're sort of moving into other areas. Water's becoming, in the Geelong Advertiser today, there's water's becoming a big concern worldwide. So we feel like that's a really natural avenue to keep building out our capability to support.
That's interesting. G21 have earmarked water resources as a key issue going forward.
Yep.
And funny enough, our last interview out here, Mark, was with Shannon Kennedy.
It was.
Around at Kennedy's, the asbestos champions.
Yeah. So we work with Kennedy's. So Kennedy's will do the removal, and we will do the compliance piece of doing the air monitoring and the sampling. So, I guess they're complementary services.
So the thing that struck me in this conversation is, if you go back, how long have you been here at Scaada?
Nearly 3 years.
3 years. So 10 years ago, you would never have had this conversation.
No.
You're using words you wouldn't even have thought about.
Completely. And it's funny, like Dale and I, we have a great relationship. He's a great guy. We often laugh, and I say, do you know, if this job had been advertised, I was never applying for it.
No.
And so that's a great encouragement for me that, sometimes the doors open and opportunities present themselves, and you sort of step into it, and it's not always as obvious as the big booming, advertisement that we're making a change. And to your point, I wouldn't have. If you had have told me when you and I, back in the day, there's no way I would have thought that would have been
all right,
something.
Tony, I want to change track for a minute. I want to talk about leadership, and particularly with youth. And there's always this common argument about are leaders born or leaders made. And I know our ex-chief of the Army, Cosgrove, says that they can be made. I have a bit of the opposite belief, that you can see leadership in youth, particularly at school level, so as they get it, and that generally, in my experience, they end up being leaders later on in life. What's your take on leadership with the youth, and how do we develop it, or what your general opinion?
Yeah, look, that's a great question. So I'm probably not as firm it's one or the other. I think it has to be a combination of both. And, in any leadership, developing that, or any skill, and I was being in education for 20 years, you can't not help have this perspective that I would always, talk to parents around. Every child has a gift in there, and so in my mind, from a faith perspective, that's a God-given gift, and so part of the educator's responsibility is to find that and to nurture that, and that might be music, might be sport, might be humility and working with people and caring and empathy. Leadership is one of those things, and we did a lot in that space with young leaders, and my sort of leaning was always that year 9, that 15, where the world's clunky, your brain doesn't work, but you actually, it's a really pivotal moment where you're starting to develop, and in terms of adolescent, you're recognising how you're different from mum and dad, and trying to figure out who you are in the world. And so I think that bit around, we always would talk about leadership is influence. And so your influence can be big up in lights, or it can be quietly around the back. One of the things that has always struck me when we talk about young people, sadly, there's sometimes a negative leaning when we talk about adolescence. We see a group of boys with their pants hanging down and hats on backwards walking down. As a community, we have this negative leaning. What are those boys up to? We have this. And spending 20 years with that age group, they are the most, enthusiastic, optimistic about life, not a care in the world. So that bit, as a community, for us, all of us, actually, and businesses play a big role in this, is supporting dads at work, supporting the sporting clubs to develop these young people, not just the leaders in there, but what are those gifts? What are the things that we're trying to develop? But I guess to just directly to your question, developing the leaders, I think young people are born with the leadership ability and skill and capacity, and it's through the leadership mentoring is drawing that out and probably helping fine-tune that. I was privileged to have great leaders who invested in me. I had good opportunities, doors open, but those things just didn't happen, and you weren't successful because of what I have. There's, I think there's natural things that you've got, but other people help shape that, and that's certainly your parents. It's influential people. It's that phys ed teacher, a little bit for me, and then mentors in the workplace, uncles, aunties.
Well, see, and in any walk of life, there are people who, we're not all equal. We know that, and we all have different skills. I've got to recognise that, and there are people doing things that I think I'm good at who are better than me. But the issue is that I've done a lot of work for Year 10 kids, work experience, Year 9 kids, 10, work experience week. and you can just see in some of them, well, you're a little bit different, and you've got great potential.
Yeah.
And as you've alluded to before, the good teachers pick that out, and they nurture it. That's good. Yeah.
So do you miss teaching?
Yeah, look, I miss a part of it.
Yep.
And so finding other ways to get that. So my first day here, interestingly, when I walked in, there were two young people. Oh, g'day, Mr. Costa. So there were two ex-students here, and I guess what I miss is being a connected person, is the community and the people. There were bits to my role where there was a lot that I sort of don't miss in the busy and the intense, but I guess it's that bit of partnering with families but I have an opportunity to do that here. We've got a great group of young staff, and down at the football club I've got 3 boys that are busy in sport, like you were saying before, Bill, chasing around, an ability to do that in a different way. It doesn't have to be my job.
Yep.
Yeah.
So question that Bill normally asks, if we went around the crew and said, tell us what sort of a leader Tony is, what would they say?
Oh, gee, it's a very, very good question.
And remember, they may listen to this.
Look, I'd hope that they would say that Tony listens and that he's genuine and that he's really in my corner. One of the things I try to do is to empower others, and that part of that is learning and growing. I hope that they would say that they feel they've got an advocate, a mentor, a support person to help them do their job better. I guess, the listening and genuine is a clear part of it, and hopefully they see a bit of strategic direction as well, that they feel confident that we're going in the right direction.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So to find Scaada, just Google Scaada, SCAADA.
Yeah, SCAADA.com.au.
And it'll pop up. And Tony, thank you for the conversation. That was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, thank you, Tony.
And there's one thing I remember about Tony.
Yeah.
Tony always had this amazing ability to remember kids' names.
Yep.
Have you still got that skill that you remember people's names?
I remember Travis and Sarah very well.
So there you go.
So you're two. Yeah, look, I think when you're in school, one of the things that, so leadership for me in that is if I'm meeting with you, Mark, and you're bringing your young people and you're entrusting them to us, I need to know their name. So I made it a really clear, intentional thing that I'd know every child's name on that campus. And so, that transfer that over here, knowing your staff's name, their partner's name, their kid's name is important.
It's a great skill, because I can remember when we took Travis, I think was the first one that went to Bellarine, and when we came home and we were chatting about what did he think, he made the comment, he knew every kid's name was the first thing that popped out. So it was a great skill. So
thanks, Mark.
So thank you, Tony.
Yep.
No,
Good luck in
it.
the next few years or wherever it leads. And thank you for taking time to chat to us.
No, thanks, guys. Appreciate the time.